Okay, I can see it now. Very good, very good. So, welcome everyone. We're so happy to have you here on this next Sunday, December 15, 2024. We have with us Mr. Peter Terry. We are, of course, going to have our 2 p.m. session as well on the Pentateuch. But in addition to that, we have another session of significance that we want to host on 11 a.m. session today. This topic is, does Baha'u'lláh want us to get involved in changing society? It's a pretty forthright, very easy topic to talk about, but when you get into the weeds, it's an interesting subject, really, because yes, there's a basic answer and there's a lot more to it too. So this discussion explores Baha'u'llah's guidance on societal change, emphasizing the Baha'i approach to serving humanity and avoiding political partisanship. What does that mean? Key points include focus on spiritual transformation. Baha'u'lláh discouraged political activism, urging followers to establish the kingdom of God through spiritual practices, teaching and building Baha'i institutions. Non-partisanship. Baha'is are advised not to align with political or ideological movements, as the faith's teachings transcend such affiliations. Service without force. Change should be pursued without violence, illegal activity, or extremist measures. Collaboration with like-minded organizations is encouraged when aligned with Baha'i principles. Rejecting extremes. Baha'is must balance empathy and dialogue with adherence to their unique principles, avoiding trends that conflict with the faith's values. Moderation and respect. Baha'is should engage respectfully with differing opinions, avoiding disputes while maintaining integrity and learning from others. Ultimately, the Baha'i teachings advocate a spiritually driven, inclusive, and constructive approach to societal betterment. Our speaker today is Mr. Peter Terry, and as all you may have heard him before, and if you haven't, please check out our YouTube channel, Clearwater Baha'is, or the Facebook page, Baha'i Center of Clearwater. We have talks where he appears there, and you can watch them. They're really good. He has already done subjects such as the Kitabi Iqan, the Persian Bayan. He's spoken on specific subjects that could be at a general level or a deeper level. We've had quite a bit of information provided to us so we can do our own research. Likewise, today, we're going to be having the same. There are links that you can find on clearwaterbaha'is.org. And further, Mr. Peter Terry, as an author, teacher, and scholar with 8 published books, he's, of course, contributed to other books by providing chapters. You can find this material online as well, where he has written these materials. So with that being said, we welcome you again, all of you, to this presentation today on this topic. Does Baha'u'lláh want us to get involved in changing society? That's a big question. A lot of people have been trying to answer it. And again, this will be an impression of Mr. Peter Terry, and he'll be sourcing from the Baha'i writings. Do your own research, look at the sources he provides, and develop your own opinion. We are thankful that all of you are here today, and we hope that we can elevate conversations when you bring them to your own little community that you're a part of, be it your family or your neighborhood, whatever that may be. We are hopeful that we can change the world just one little bit at a time. Thank you, Peter. We appreciate you coming.
Thank you for your eloquent introduction, my brother, and a loving greeting to all of you who have joined us today. And so I wanted to begin by making a couple of sort of general comments and then go to the topic at hand. One of the comments that I wanted to make is that although we sometimes preface our statements about the faith by stating that, of course, this is my opinion about a particular thing and my experience and nothing more than that. And although and that might be sufficient for some people, I think that we should understand have a broader understanding of why we feel that we need to make that statement. And I think that the reason why we do have that feeling is because we are, most of us, if not all of us, residents in countries that have democratic forms of government. And that means that the people are used to expressing themselves and to exchange their views, and to a certain, often to quite a high degree, disagreeing with each other, and yet somehow finding a way to come to some sort of a compromise or consensus so that things can get done. And things can get done not only in the sense of action, but also agreement about general principles or even specifics. So we have that experience. Of course, there are millions of people in the world who don't. Billions, in fact, who are who know that their opinions are not valued and not approved by their families, by their neighborhoods, by their national governments. So they keep them to themselves, and if they express them, it's at their risk. And it can be a very significant risk for lots of people in the world to express themselves. So I think it's important that we have this understanding that the reason why we have this, in a sense, the luxury of exercising our right to the freedom of speech is because we live in countries where the government gives us that permission. And that is one of the great principles, actually, of the faith, is that Baha'u'lláh highly approves of that, highly approves of us living under governments that will give us that permission. But he also says a very interesting thing about that. He says that if we are living in a government which does not give us that permission, we do not have the right to fight. We do not have the right to express ourselves, even though it's against the law, in effect, in that country. I'm going to come back to that later, but I wanted to say that I honor and respect and appreciate the views of everyone who's logged in and of the billions of people who aren't logged in. And I think that it's very important that as followers of Baha'u'lláh, we understand that he advocated for us to listen to each other and to not immediately be judgmental, not immediately say, no, I think such and such, and my views are right and yours are wrong. So that's one thing I wanted to acknowledge is I may share things with you today that you strongly disagree with, and that's fine. And I really mean that it's fine. I do not expect that everybody will have the same reaction. We come from such different backgrounds, even though all of us live in countries where we have permission to express ourselves, maybe especially because we do that, is that we have developed our own opinions about everything. And that's a blessing. And so I don't expect, what I hope is that you will learn maybe a little something about my points of view, and also maybe be introduced to some passages from the Baha'i writings that you were not aware of. And so also this is very preliminary sort of discussion of a principle that's enormously important and that really preoccupies Baha'is all over the world. How can we make a difference? Can we make a difference? Do we want to make a difference? And to what degree and how? And this is, we not only talk about it, but we probably think about it a lot more than we talk about it. And we talk about it a lot more than we do anything about it. And that's understandable considering how harmful it could be if we took the wrong action. and if we said the wrong thing. And for those people who live in less than democratic societies, they know this risk. And I say that, I'm reiterating that because many of the members of our American Baha'i community and the European Baha'i community and of many other communities around the world there are members who come from Iran. And in Iran, you cannot speak forthrightly about your convictions most of the time to most of the people, because you could end up in jail, you could end up with your family being harmed, you could lose your job, you could get kicked out of school, and more importantly, your entire family could be punished for you having done that. And of course, Persian Baha'is are not the only ones who are living in this state who have this precarious state when it comes to expressing themselves. Of course, the Baha'is in Russia, for example, now they cannot speak their minds honestly, and neither can the ones living in Ukraine, by the way. War zones are not a zone in which you can speak your views forthrightly, not even in many democracies. So that being said, I want to go to another thing, which is that in understanding how we Baha'is need to respond to change, to participate in it or not to participate in it, we have a blessing, a great blessing that is always there for us. And that is the blessing of our institutions. We have the local spiritual assembly, we have the regional Baha'i Council, we have the National Spiritual Assembly, we have the Universal House of Justice. Each one of these institutions, we can address and ask them if we're not sure about whether we should do this or that, whether we should say this or that, whether we should publish this or that comment. We have that. We also have an enormous correspondence, much of which is available on the internet with search engines so that you can look up and find out, well, how about this particular, how about climate change? Where do Baha'is stand on this? Is there a variety of viewpoints, or is there just one viewpoint? We can explore that sort of thing in terms of how the institutions have responded. That's an enormous resource, and we should avail ourselves of it. And not think that we'll simply express our personal points of view without becoming informed about what not just our fellow Baha'is, but more importantly, our Baha'i institutions have already said on the subject. So I'm not going to be talking today about what the Baha'i institutions have said, because that is available to everybody, and it's better for people to get it directly, and rather than rely on an intermediary. Well, as you know, we don't have any clergy in the faith, and so I don't have any authority. I'm going to be sharing with you some quotations, principally from Bahá'u'lláh, some also from Abdul-Baha, which may or may not be familiar to you. And my purpose is to encourage you to come to your own understanding, because our own understanding is ultimately the one that motivates our actions. And it's only when we have our own understanding that we can then also look at what the institutions tell us and understand why it is that they have said what they said. Because usually the institutions in a letter are not going to quote all kinds of passages from the writings, because the assumption always with Baha'is is that we've done our homework, and we should do our homework, so that when the institution says do this, we know why. they don't have to write a treatise every single time they give us an instruction. So let me now proceed. I will now see how I can screen share and find the document that I'm looking for. And I'm not finding the document. That's a lovely sort of thing that happens. I don't really know why this happens, but it does happen to me. So just give me a
Peter,
moment
would you
here
like me
while
to
I
share the
find
document?
the document.
I can share the
Oh,
document
sure,
for
that'd
you.
be great. Sure, why don't you do that? Yeah, and I also appreciate that because my internet connection is unstable. It's most of the time, and especially when it's overcast, which it is at the moment, in the Sierra Nevada, which are some mountains up in Northern California. So let me see. He's going to share soon, and then we can look at it. Also, I want to apologize to you for the hacking cough that I have. And sometimes it happens too quickly for me to mute so that you hear the full brunt of it. So let's see. I don't know what this chat GPT thing is. That's not me. I didn't write that. So what is you were showing my document and now there's something else. Hmm. I think he's coming back soon. Here we go. Here it is. All right. So I'm going to give you a little context here. Jeremiah asked me about a topic that was being discussed in, I think, the Clearwater Baha'i community and at Feast, and that he wanted us to have an opportunity to talk about this morning. And I'm going to read a little bit of that so that you understand the context. We're looking to explore what the Baha'i writings say about political partisanship and our societal responsibilities for helping and serving one another. The discourse during this past feast and among the public has touched on activism, particularly the limited roles Baha'is usually play in it. For example, there's been discussion about extreme forms of activism, like chaining oneself to a tree or more concerning actions such as the murder of a United Healthcare CEO. Right? I think we can skip to the end here. So that was the concern. Now, I have no doubt that now the problem is I can't scroll, Jeremiah, so you have to do the scrolling for me. Okay. So I have no doubt that although Americans are probably more aware of some of this extreme behavior than other people because it's reported widely in the news, and of course a lot of us read the news in our own country, and I'm not assuming that necessarily our brother from Wales is going to be informed about what kind of nonsense people are doing in the United States. But that being said, the context is quite similar in all around the world. And so I want to talk about some general principles first, because I think that might be helpful. First of all, Baha'u'lláh discouraged his followers from becoming involved in government. He called for them to establish the kingdom of God on earth by teaching the faith, by living according to its laws and principles, and building its institutions. How do we know that? We know that by reading the many references to these themes in the passages of the writings translated by the Guardian, included in Gleanings, and those in the Epistle to the Son of the Wolf. Also, there are many passages to be found in the writings in the tablets that were translated by a committee of the Baha'i World Center as writings of Baha'u'lláh revealed after the Kitab al-Aqdas. When we read those, we see what he's asking us to do. We're here to build the kingdom, not to reform the existing forms of government, and not just government, but society in general. Abdu'l-Baha continued this same approach, and he added something a little probably in the context of having so many conversations and interactions with Western Baha'is and Western Baha'is, and then of course people who weren't Baha'i at all. And that was that he praised certain kinds of secular governmental laws, principles, and institutions. And he condemned others. So, whereas Baha'u'lláh, for the most part, remained silent on the various merits of different kinds of government, Abdu'l-Baha spoke out. How do we know that? We know that because you read his talks that were published in Promulgation of Universal Peace, Paris talks, Abdu'l-Baha in London, and the ones that didn't make it into those compilations that were published in Star of the West. That's how we know it. There are also some tablets that talk about those questions. But most of the discussions by Abdu'l-Baha were made to Western audiences, live in his presentations. Now we come to Shoghi Effendi. Shoghi Effendi continued the same approach, calling for the Baha'is to focus on building the new world order and not trying to fix the old world order. Now, how do we know that? We know that by reading his letters, and particularly the ones published in the World Order of Baha'u'lláh, in The Promised Days Come, and The Citadel of Faith, and The Advent of Divine Justice. That's an overview. If we read what the central figures of the faith and the Guardian wrote on this subject, then we become well-informed Baha'is. That's the bottom line. If one were to read only introductions to the faith, pamphlets and so forth, one might not know what it is specifically that they said on this subject. But we're supposed to be reading the writings, right? So if we read the writings, we're going to find out. And then we don't have to have Peter Terry or anybody else telling people what the writings say, because we'll know for ourselves. And the Universal House of Justice has continued very much this same approach. And you look at the focus of the current plan and the previous plans. It's always been that we need to concentrate on developing our local communities and carrying out our responsibilities on a local level. That's not to say that the institutions are not engaged in discourse on a higher level or with secular government and the representatives of other faiths and institutions. The institutions do that. They have external affairs, public affairs. They have the International Baha'i Council, and so this happens. These things happen, but they're done at an institutional level. And whenever we Baha'is get involved in anything but doing what we're called upon to do by, in this case, Baha'u'lláh, Abdu'l-Baha, Shoghi Effendi, and the Universal House of Justice, we get called back. We need to focus. You need to focus on what is actually going to work. What's going to work is you start with the people around you, and it grows naturally. And so now I want to go to the next. Can you scroll down a little bit more so I can see more and they can see more? All right. Now, here are some general principles that I think we don't even need to cite scripture to know that we agree about these things and to know that they are written clearly in the Baha'i writings. Baha'i should unilaterally reject the use of force in bringing about any change as counterproductive and in violation with Baha'i standards. That is a statement that I think every Baha'i for, 200 years has believed in. Force is not the way to do it. And we're talking about us as individuals, not talking about what governments need to do in response to different situations. We as individuals which are not to use force. Number 2 is Baha'i should unilaterally reject any engagement in illegal activity in order to bring about social justice as we understand that principle, because that is contrary to Baha'i standards. We're not to break the law. Breaking the law is forbidden in the faith. We are called upon over and over again, be obedient to your government. Okay? Now, another thing is Baha'i should not assume that whatever is popular among any group of people in the West, we often feel that whatever is popular among young people, we're compelled to pay very close attention to it because they're young, so they must know better than us. I don't know how that happened, but it's we should understand that that is not a Baha'i principle. That is a cultural norm. You might very well say it's an abnormal in the context of history, because in the context of history, as people grew older, they became wiser, and generally they had a more valuable perspective on things than young people. But we've come to believe, many Baha'is believe this, and act accordingly, that young people know best. So let's just do what they say, because that's the only thing that will really work with them. Another thing is that we should not assume that people who are advocates for what they perceive to be a necessary change in society, that the advocates are necessarily better informed, have better judgment, and are more in touch with, certainly not more in touch with the will of God. The standard always should be the Baha'i standard, because we're Baha'is. And it is in being Baha'is that we have unity with other people. Apart from that, if you were to take us outside of our espousal of the faith and our connection with the faith, we're just as different as everybody else in the world. And we'd be arguing with each other all the time and not accomplishing anything in unity. So that I wanted to bring that up, because this is often a subject that is not talked about, is the fact that we tend to kowtow to young people and also to strong advocates for a particular change. We tend to feel that, well, they must be right, and so we're going to have to follow them. Another thing that is important principle for us to keep in mind is that we're not to align ourselves with specific political and other ideological movements. And this is a source of endless frustration for Baha'is, because we're very tempted to go and join this group or that group and speak in favor of this candidate and that candidate and this politician, that politician. And we often do it off the cuff, and then, we either realize after we've spoken or somebody points out to us that, is that the Baha'i point of view? Well, and that's the problem, is that those specific political and ideological movements do not share the Baha'i teachings in their entirety. They may have some common elements with some of the Baha'i teachings, but the Baha'i teachings are not, we should not consider that the Baha'i teachings are to be cherry picked. We can say, oh, well, I like this principle, and I'm going to ignore that one. Because it is in their entirety, in their unity, and in their completeness that they are providing the remedy for the world's ills. It is the totality that is the fix for humankind, not this or that, right? And especially not this or that as it's defined by other people. Other people who've never read Baha'u'lláh, never considered his point of view, and very often, in fundamental ways, disagree with what he's said. Now, I want to bring up a few examples. They're just a few. You could bring up hundreds of examples. Hundreds of examples of where we are surrounded by people who have strong views about these particular issues, and we may be drawn in different ways to stances that may or may not be compatible with what the Baha'i teachings have told us. So what I'm going to suggest is this, because I want this to be, and Jeremiah also wisely said that he would like this to be a discussion. He'd like us to be able to have to some give and take on this. Now, it's very difficult to have a discussion with, what is it now, 13 people or whatever, who are in this group, and have everybody express themselves, everybody have a chance, and maybe someday we'll find out how to do that using technology, but for the moment it's challenging. And then also we don't have 4 hours to spend talking about this, but maybe we can come back to it. And because I think it's something it's important for us not just to have people express one point of view, but for us to hear various points of view on this. Now, while Baha'is, issue number one, while Baha'is are in favor of international peace, it is not peace at any price. Baha'u'lláh called for the nations of the world to protect national borders and to collectively resist any nation that violates those borders. Where do I get that idea? Baha'u'lláh talks about the lesser peace and the terms of the lesser peace in 3 different places in his writings that have been translated. 2 of them are in the Gleanings and also found in the tablets of Baha'u'lláh written after the Kitab Aqdas, and the 3rd one is in that particular collection and not in Gleanings. But the most, I think, expansive statement is actually Abdu'l-Baha's statement in The Secret of Divine Civilization, where he says, in this all-embracing pact, and he's talking, and he calls it the Great Covenant. The Great Covenant is this covenant between the nations to abolish war. And he says, in this all-embracing pact, the limits and frontiers of each and every nation shall be clearly fixed. The principles underlying the relations of governments towards one another definitely laid down, and all international agreements and obligations ascertained. In like manner, the size of the armaments of every government should be strictly limited, for the preparations for war and the military forces of many nations should be allowed to increase. They will arouse the suspicion of others. There seems to be a typo here. It should read, should any of these governments violate any of its provisions, all the governments on earth should arise to reduce it to utter submission Nay, the human race as a whole should resolve with every power as its disposal to destroy that government. These are very strong words, and they have nothing to do with sort of the new age ideology of let's just be nice to each other. The Baha'i approach acknowledges that some people are like wolves, and you have to protect the flock from the wolves or they will eat them. And I'm using, that's exactly what Abdul Baha used in some answered questions to describe the reason why the international community needs to have teeth to stop war. Because people will continue, national leaders will continue, and terrorists will continue to arise and want to overturn governments and want to invade other countries. And the only way to stop them is through what he calls the Great Covenant, to agree that we're not going to allow that to occur anymore. We will unitedly resist it. So that's one example. And that distinguishes us quite clearly from mainstream pacifists who basically say we should abolish, we can have unilateral we can have certain countries can give up war, and every country who gives up war is good. That's, this is the way we do it. We'll do it incrementally. Baha'u'lláh makes it very clear that this is not incremental. This comes from a compact between all national governments. We're not going to tolerate this anymore. And if anybody tries, we agree to unitedly resist it and stop that person. Now, number two, another issue. While Baha'is are in favor of cherishing the planet, don't go too fast or I can't read what I said. Yes, right there is fine. Well, Baha'is are in favor of cherishing the planet. I mean, the planet was created by God, so of course we're in favor of cherishing our planet. It is by implementing spiritual teachings and moderating material development rather than adopting whatever platform has been proved by any source that's human. Let's put it that way. Because the human sources, everybody's got their own idea about how things should be done. And they say, well, my solution is the most rational. My solution is the most scientific. My solution is the best keeping, and it's the most compatible with my religious or other convictions. Well, we have a different perspective. And that perspective is described by Abdul Baha in a number of his talks and tablets. And I'm going to quote one of the passages, which is from Some Answered Questions. Know, therefore, that what the people possess and believe to be true is liable to error. For if in proving or disproving a thing, a proof drawn from the evidence of the senses is advanced, this criterion is clearly imperfect. If a rational proof is adduced, the same holds true. And likewise, if a traditional proof is given. Thus, it is clear that man does not possess any criterion of knowledge that can be relied upon. Wow. I repeat, thus it is clear that man does not possess any criterion of knowledge that can be relied upon. So what's the solution? but the grace of the Holy Spirit is the true criterion regarding which there is no doubt or uncertainty. That grace consists in the confirmations of the Holy Spirit, which are vouchsafed to man and through which certitude is attained. Now, I'm sure we're going to have lots of discussion on that one. So let's go to the next topic. The next topic. While Baha'is are in favor of the harmony between men and women, it cannot endorse the demands of those who seek to completely reinvent gender identity and to deem traditional masculinity and femininity to be inherently toxic. We live at a time when that redefinition is being not only proposed, but enacted into law. Consider what Abdu'l-Baha wrote. The world of humanity has two wings. One is women and the other men. Not until both wings are equally developed can the bird fly. Should one wing remain weak, flight is impossible. Not until the world of women becomes equal to the world of men in the acquisition of virtues and perfections can success and prosperity be attained as they ought to be. Let's look at another issue. If you could scroll just a little bit more so we can see that. Yes, thank you very much. And while Baha'is are in favor of assisting the poor, the uneducated, the handicapped, the sick, abolishing all traces of coerced labor and service, and I don't mean just slavery, because Abdu'l-Baha talked about industrial slavery. There's all kinds of imposed labor that happens in the world, and it's against Baha'i principle. And liberating those who are captives of oppression. While we are in favor of all these things, Baha'u'lláh is not in favor of the abolition of rank, or of individual initiative, or diversity. And he does not advocate a homogenized society in which everybody is the same. Yes, sometimes many of you will recognize that when a 5-year-old daughter comes to you with something, then she takes precedence. But we have solved that problem. Now, to return to this question, I'll repeat the last bit. Baha'u'lláh does not favor the abolition of rank, of individual initiative, of diversity, and he does not advocate a homogenized global society in which everybody's the same. As Baha'u'lláh wrote, to transgress the limits of one's own rank and station is in no wise permissible. The integrity of every rank and station must needs be preserved. By this is meant that every created thing should be viewed in the light of the station it hath been ordained to occupy. I'm going to quote, because this is an issue that's actually very, very big on people's minds in any democratic society. Because in democratic societies, we've all been taught that we're all the same. We all have the same rights and all the same privileges, same responsibilities. And the sameness has been so much emphasized that very often the understanding of diversity has not been there. And because we didn't understand diversity, then we could live in a state of total self-contradiction. In the United States, we had a constitution that guaranteed equality, but It only guaranteed equality for white men with property. How could you do that? If your principle is that you're going to have equality, it has to be for everybody. But we never did that. And we still haven't done that in the United States. We have not passed any sort of amendment to the Constitution that elevates women's rights to the same level as men's rights. So this is what Abdu'l-Baha said about the concept of equality, of sameness between people. All right, scroll a little bit more, please, so that they can see this whole text. It's tiny. You may have to take out your magnifying glasses. That's it. Now, I'm going to read the whole thing because it expands upon this principle that was described in the quotation from Gleanings. We see amongst us men who are overburdened with riches on the one hand. Isn't that lovely? Overburdened with riches. And on the other, those unfortunate ones who starve with nothing. Those who possess several stately palaces, and those do not have where to lay their head. Some we find with numerous courses of costly and dainty food, while others can scarce find sufficient crusts to keep them alive. While some are clothed in velvets, furs, and fine linen, others have insufficient, poor, and thin garments with which to protect them from the cold. This condition of affairs is wrong, and it must be remedied. Now, the remedy must be carefully undertaken. It cannot be done by bringing to pass absolute equality between men. Equality is a chimera. It is entirely impracticable. Even if equality could be achieved, it could not continue. And if its existence were possible, the whole order of the world would be destroyed. The law of order must always obtain in the world of humanity. Heaven has so decreed in the creation of man. Some are full of intelligence, others have an ordinary amount of it, and others again are devoid of intellect. In these three classes of men, there is order, but not equality. How could it be possible that wisdom and stupidity should be equal? Humanity, like a great army, requires a general, captains, under-officers in their degree, and soldiers, each with their own appointed duties. Degrees are absolutely necessary to ensure an orderly organization. An army could not be composed of generals alone, or of captains only, or of nothing but soldiers without one in authority. The certain result of such a plan would be that disorder and demoralization would overtake the whole army. Now that's deserving of a discussion all by itself. Let's go. I'm going to. I have several other points that I could go on, but if I go through all of them, you're not going to speak. So this document is available on the Clearwater website, and maybe Jeremiah could tell all of us how you can get a copy of this document for yourself. What is the technical process you have to go through in order to copy it?
So I'm going to put it in the Zoom chat right now, and I'll attach it to the video, the link. And they should be able to access it directly that way.
Oh, okay. So what do you do when it's in the Zoom chat to download it to your computer?
Well, we'll have to verify that they have permissions to download, but they should be able to download it directly from the link through the Google Doc itself. But
Okay.
I can also create a
Okay, I
PDF
just
of
wanted to
it.
make sure that they don't run into technical problems. That's all.
So in
Go
that
ahead.
case, what I could do is I could create a PDF and I can put the PDF online and I'll link that in the videos as well. And I'll drop it in this chat, but it
Oh,
will be
cool.
after the fact. It won't be right now.
Okay. All right. So everybody, to get a copy of this document, wait a while and come back to the website, and then you'll be able to save it. You know, click on the PDF and save it to your computer, and then it will open without any problem. The reason why there could be a problem opening it in its current form is that it was created in a restricted environment called Google Docs. And that would be the main reason why we don't want you to run into problems. Okay, so friends, let's open the discussion. There are a few different issues that I brought up. Several. And I'd like to invite you to ask questions, make statements. Let's begin.
So we have several comments, just basically, thank you for mentioning this topic. It's very true and timely. And can you put the resource document online? And so I will be doing that. Thank you. So anyone in Zoom, if you have anything else, please, now's the time.
Now, my friends, I want to tell you something. If you were sitting at my kitchen table and we were having this conversation, and I just talked for quite a while about it, I could not stop you from interrupting each other, right? Because everybody's thinking about this, right? When we have something to say, don't be held back by the fact that we're online, because just imagine that you're at my kitchen table and you know, we're sitting around together and we want to share. Now Peter Burns has his hand up, and I'm going to call on him because his name is Peter. No, that's not why.
Hi, Peter. Just a thought.
Hello there.
Just come to me that we all have different capacities which we can develop, and it goes along with, you know, we can't all be the same, and we can make progress through life by developing our capacities. Just a thought.
Yes. And Peter, consider this. What was your profession? What was your work?
Mostly I was in the merchant navy and a seaman for many years.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And how I could tell you that if I had chosen that career, I would have been absolutely miserable. Miserable. Now, maybe I could have done it. Maybe I could have carried out the work, but it would not have been, I wouldn't have been happy. Being jostled by waves most of my life, most of my living time, that's not my idea of good time. And being surrounded by 99 to 100% men, no.
Yeah,
But you could do it, and you did it, and you did it well. And then God bless you for having done it, because we need people like you to make the world go round, you know? I mean, without merchant marines, we wouldn't have a car to drive. because most of our cars come from Asia. They have to be shipped here, and they're coming in boats, right?
Yeah,
So, and that's just the tip of the iceberg.
for me, it was such a mind-blowing experience and a very happy experience.
Yeah.
So I'll just leave it there.
Yes. And you know what? Think of all the other professions that you didn't take that, but somebody else did. And I just had surgery from an oral surgeon. And this guy is phenomenal. He's the best in the best surgeon in that field in this whole area. And everybody knows that. And his attitude is so positive and so humble and so warm. It's because he's doing what he loves doing and he knows how to do best. No?
Thank you.
Thank you. Rodney.
Yes. Greetings, Peter. I know how you like questions. I also know how you like paradoxes. So I would like to explore a little bit more about this rank and station, because the writings seem to be paradoxical a bit on that. There is the quote from Bahá'u'lláh where he talks about the unity of rank and station, and that, you know, ever since the seeking of preference and distinction came into play, the world has been laid to waste. It has become desolate. And how each one of us how each one of us is different and unique, but to regard ourselves as superior knowledge, learning, etc., is a grievous transgression. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. And this is the sort of thing that, and frankly, this is the sort of thing that if Baha'is don't talk about it, is that we are trying to live in a state of cognitive dissonance. We're trying to think that we can have a strong opinion about something and then hold in our minds exactly the opposite, but without reconciling them. That's not good. That's not good. There's a whole lot of mental illness that happens in the world when people have unresolved differences. And this is one of the great Baha'i teachings, is that we're meant to reconcile, not to just exist with contradictions, but to actually reconcile those differences. You know, if it was enough to just exist with people who disagree with us, well, then we would have solved the problem of humanity a long time ago, because, for example, the Ottomans were great at simply tolerating Christians, Jews, Nusayris, all these different, groups. But that wasn't unity, because they were never reconciled. So that was the hug. So, yes. How do I understand that? I understand it in the following way. This has to do with how we comport ourselves. As I pointed out about this surgeon, this dental surgeon that worked on my mouth, he has a rank in his field which far excels me. Now, what would happen if I had to have an office and I was going to pull people's teeth out? I have no training, no experience, no feeling for the job. I am not his equal. I do not occupy the same rank. However, does he treat me as a human being as if I'm inferior? Not for a moment. This, I think, is the absolute key thing. Jesus talked about this with his followers. His followers were jostling for position. And he said, the greatest among you is the one who serves everybody. To me, that encapsulates Baha'u'llah's intention. His intention is that no matter how high we may rise in our particular profession, in our particular field of endeavor, we are meant to treat each other with love, with humility, and with service. And if we don't, then that high rank that we occupy is of no use to us. Because in the spiritual world, we're not going to be dental surgeons or, we're not going to have all these professions that have exalted us into some position of significance in human society. We don't have that anymore. Nobody has a PhD in heaven. There are no master's degrees either. That's the great equalizer. We go to the next world, and all that stuff that was important in this world, and it is important in this world, all of that stuff disappears. And it all depends on, did you treat your fellow human being with love, compassion, tenderness, honor, respect? Did you do it? Because that's our calling. And I think Baha'u'lláh, we have to distinguish rank in the sense of, are we pulling rank? Are we asserting our rank in order for our personal advantage? Or is that rank simply a description of what we're doing in the world? And I think that in that way, we see that these statements are not contradictory, they're complementary.
Thank you.
Now, I know there's lots of people here that I know are big speakers, but you're all being quiet. Don't be quiet. Please raise up your hands. Show yourselves.
Peter Burns did raise his hand again. Peter, did you have something you wanted to
Oh,
add?
good. Okay.
He just lowered it. Right. So, well, would you like to? I guess we could probably
So what
finish out
happened?
with the. We can probably finish out with the, some final thoughts on it. And I've submitted the PDF so that anyone can have access to these topics. So feel free to find them on the website and on the videos. And then I guess we can conclude for the day.
All right. And so I want to put an idea out there. This is the first time that I was asked to basically start and lead a discussion. And what have I taken away from this experience is that we're not used to that. We're not accustomed to that. We don't do that. And because we don't do that, is that people are reticent to participate. I want to suggest that Clearwater, that your program consider starting a series of discussions where, rather than that would be parallel to the presentations, rather than replacing them or even being interspersed with them, but rather something different, where, because we don't have opportunities except for a few minutes and feast. And, you know, in our assembly meetings, to have a full and frank discussion about anything. It just doesn't exist. You know, to be honest with you, I stopped going to ABS conferences and other kinds of earphone conferences as well, because there was no opportunity for people to talk. There was the only discussion you had was when you went out to lunch with somebody. But the talks were always like, you talk for 45 minutes and then you got 15 minutes for Q&A, and, you know, 2 or 3 people dominate the Q&A, and that's it. Then there's no discussion. And there were 50 people in attendance. I didn't hear from all the others. And so I want to suggest that we figure out some way to create a discussion series, and that we take, rather than 5 topics, because, you know, this is too broad. It's way too broad to just talk about Baha'is being involved in change. No, we take one subset of that and say, that's what we're going to talk about during this discussion. And then we go around the circle and we ask everybody to participate, because that's what I want to hear. I want to hear all that. Sometimes the most reticent people are the people who have the most on-point comments. I've experienced that time after time. So that's my recommendation to Jeremiah and John. And that's my sort of parting word for the day, except that I think that this is a terrific topic for deep study and deep conversation, which means let's not let it go and not come back to it.
Right. I think that's a great idea. So we'll definitely discuss it some more. I really appreciate you taking the time, Peter, for helping us kind of look at this topic and look at several other ideas, and specifically find some links that we can begin to study and deepen for ourselves on these topics. So, and I appreciate everyone else who joined and that did participate today and listened and provided their opinions. And we look forward to seeing you all not only at the 2 p.m. this afternoon with Eileen Maddox, but also next week as well. So I would like to say have